Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night Parashat HaShavua class. Glad you can join us this evening on another snowy, stormy night here in Toronto, Canada, broadcasting live. We had a little break from the snow, but then it just decided to show up again. And so for those that made it here live in the Bet Knesset, it's nice to have you after a few weeks hiatus during our most recent lockdown, unfortunately. But those restrictions have been lifted, and we're glad that we can join back in person, give the shiur in person. And again, we also welcome those listening live online tonight, right now, and those listening on the future podcast and the recording, either tomorrow or in a later date. Welcome to Finding Holiness. That's where you can find all of our shiurim, findingholiness.com, findingholiness.buzzsprout.com. Thank you very much. Tonight's shiur is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Yves Nachmias, in memory of his father, Mr. Yitzhak Nachmias, Zichrono Libracha. The words of tonight, words of Torah that we say tonight, Bi Leilu Nishmato Ti Nafsho Serura Bitzror HaChayim. Amen. We are studying Parashat Teruma. Parashat Teruma is very well known to be the parasha of the Mishkan, since it is in this week's parasha that we find the building of the Mishkan and the vessels that are found in the Mishkan. It's very hard to relate to the parashiyot like these because we've never really seen these vessels in person. We've seen pictures. We've seen different images. Nowadays, we're lucky to have color pictures. Some of our good chashim may get into real good detail about it. There's even some videos you can see on YouTube of people making their artistic renditions and going through the Mishkan and the Bet HaMikdash and how it looks like. The truth is, whenever you don't see something in person, it's hard to relate to. It's hard to connect to. So you go about the parasha and you're reading about the measurements of the Aron and the measurements of the Shulchan and the Menorah and everything that possess it, and the Mizbeach HaZahav, which is next week's parasha, and the Mizbeach HaNechoshet, so on and so forth. And again, it's like, okay, again, maybe just a reminder to pray for Mashiach, so then we can actually get a chance to visit and see, maybe the tour of the Western Wall, Bezrat Hashem, one day in days of Mashiach, will lead us to, an image of what we can see inside. But for now, we're left with what's drawn up in the back of the Humash. So it's for that reason why the Chachamim, many scholars of recent generations, want to learn a little bit of life lessons from the words of the text, remazim and allusions that come from it. And I want to speak about one tonight that I think can really make a difference in the way we portray ourselves as Yehudim, as Jews, as those who are God-fearing, and especially those that spend their days learning Torah or listening to shiurim. And it's focused on the building and construction of the Aron. The Aron is the ark is the first of the vessels that we are commanded to. Moshe is commanded to build. The pasuk writes, "Ve'asu Aron atzeh shitim," that you shall make the Aron of shitim wood, amatayim v'chetzi orko, 2.5 cubits length, ve'ama v'chetzi rochbo, 1.5 cubits its width, ve'ama v'chetzi komato, and 1.5 cubits tall. V'tzipita oto zahav tahor, and you shall cover it with pure gold, mibayit u'mechutz, from the inside and the outside. Tetzapenu, you shall cover it. Ve'asita alav zer zahav saviv, and you should make around it a golden crown. This is the commandment to build the Aron. One of the most famous lessons from here is that this is the only vessel that has completely half measurements. Right, the length, width, and height are all half measurements, 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5, and of course, rabbis tell us that the Aron, which represents the setting of Torah, is never complete. A person can never say to himself, I've mastered everything. It's not something that not Einstein, that you can master all mathematics and so on and so forth. No, Torah, the more you dive into it, the more you realize how much you're lacking. So Torah also always needs to be looked upon as something that is lacking. It's a half measurement. But the Midrash asks a question. The Midrash says On all the other vessels in the Mishkan, the command, the word that's used is ve'asita shulchan, and you shall make. But when it comes to the Aron, the ark that housed the luchot, it writes ve'asu Aron. Asu means and they shall make an Aron. Ve'asu. And the Midrash answers in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shalom that God said to Moshe, why is it said ve'asu? Let everyone come and occupy themselves with the Aron so that they all merit the Torah. Everybody has the ability to occupy themselves with this holy vessel so that they have some piece of the Torah. So you have to ask yourself, how is this even possible? You know, there's 600,000 members of Klal Yisrael. How can they all come and participate in the actual construction of one Aron? The Ramban addresses this point in his he quotes this Midrash and he addresses this point in his commentary. And he suggests three possible explanations. He says, one, it could be that every individual donates a little bit of gold. Right? A little bit, 1 golden ounce, 1 ounce, whatever it is, half an ounce towards the construction of the Mishkan. And that's how they are a part of the Aron, sorry. That's a part of the Aron. Another one is that they could offer Betzalel some assistance. You know, okay, Betzalel, you want me to go to Home Depot for you? I'll go to Home Depot for you. Yalla, we'll go to Lowe's, Home Depot. I'll pick up some screws. Whatever it is that you need, I'll go out and I'll get it for you to help Betzalel. And the third way is that they could have the kavanah. They could have the intent to do so. And that's something that we're going to focus on a lot today. So the practical significance of the first two explanations are very easy to understand. Every member of Klal Yisrael who donated to the construction of the Mishkan and its vessels, they could have donated some gold, and now they're a part of the Aron. And also they could offer to assist Betzalel. It's very understandable and you know, easily to comprehend how that works. But the third explanation of that they should intend to do so, that requires further explanation. Like, what intent exactly do they have to have while Betzalel, who's the master architect, while he's fashioning the Aron? If we understand this idea, then we can maybe have the same intent today when we read this portion of the Torah this coming Shabbat and in future years. So we're going to spend a lot of time today on a Gemara found in Masechet Yoma, Daf Ayin Bet Amud Bet, which is an elucidation from one of the Amoraim, one of the most famous Amoraim that we have. His name is Rava. And Rava says in regards to the details of the Aron, the Pasuk says, "V'tzipita oto zahav tahor mibayit u'michutz tetzapenu," that you shall cover the Aron with gold from mibayit u'michutz, from outside and inside. It has to be covered in gold. Amar Rava, says Rava. What do we learn from here? Kol talmid chacham she'en tocho kevaro eno talmid chacham. That any Torah scholar whose inside is not like his outside, tocho, not kebaro, his inside is not like his outside, is not a true talmid chacham. He's not a real Torah scholar. So plain meaning of what Rava is trying to tell us is that a Torah scholar needs to learn lishma, for the sake of heaven, fulfilling the will of God to study Torah, not just for how it looks on the outside, not just for external appearances, but he has to do it with sincerity and being genuine. No ulterior motives, not for his own honor, not for prestige. If within the depths of his heart he's insincere and does not learn lishma, then his inside is not consistent with his outside. And on the outside, he looks like he's a big Talmid Chacham, but really that's not what his motives are. The problem with this makes sense. What Rava said makes total sense. The problem with this is another Gemara in Masechet Pesachim, a Gemara that is very, very well known, that's Amar Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab, Le'olam yasok adam b'torah u'b'mitzvot, that a person should always study Torah and perform mitzvot, afal pi shelo lishma, even if it's not for the sake of heaven. And here's the famous line, shemitoch shelo lishma, ba lishma, because through practicing mitzvot, through studying of Torah, not for the sake of heaven, don't worry, you will eventually do it for the sake of heaven, right? I always give the examples of you give kids candies when they come to synagogue, and that's what they look forward. They're not coming to synagogue to sit there and sing Moshe and to pray Amidah Kavanah. That's not what they're coming to Beit Knesset. They're coming to get candy, Toch shelo lishma. But you do it enough times, they'll figure it out on their own. Wow, this is a place of worship. And therefore, I'm going to pray as well. And then you hope that they're going to come lishma. So we see from here, from this Gemara, that a person should study Torah, at least initially, even if it's not for the sake of heaven, and even though his inner motives and intent is not truly representing his external actions. So a person is never going to admit that I'm studying Torah and I'm performing mitzvot for the wrong intent and for the wrong motives. That's not usually what a person is going to do, but nevertheless, we see that. So we have these two problems. On one hand, Rava says, any Talmid Chacham who is inside is not like his outside is not really a Talmid Chacham. And at the same time, we have this, but don't worry. You should learn Shelo Lishma, because when you learn Lishma, eventually you'll come to Lishma for the sake of heaven. So one of the answers that's given to reconcile this is that when Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rab, Mitoch Shelo Lishma Ba Lishma, he said it as an imperative, as a command. He doesn't say that a person is allowed to study Torah without proper intent. On the contrary, he says a person should always study Torah and perform mitzvot, even if it's not lishma. And the Chachamim explain that when a person initially begins to serve God, it's unlikely. Think about yourself for a moment. It's unlikely or even impossible to study Torah and perform mitzvot lishma. The guy who's just starting for the first time to learn Torah, or to the first time he puts on tefillin, shakes a lulav, he's not doing it lishma. What does he know about lishma? What does he know about to say God? This is the first time. Some guy's putting on tefillin, a Lubavitch guy's putting on tefillin, a guy in a supermarket. He's performing mitzvah. The guy who's doing it lishma, the guy who's got his tefillin on, he's doing it for the sake of heaven. He has no idea what he's doing, but he puts it on. So for all practical purposes, initially you're doing it even without proper intent. Lo lishma. As he continues to grow and climb the ladder of kedusha and ruchniut and spirituality, he will eventually be able to learn Torah lishma. So that being the case, how can Rava expound the pasuk v'tzipita oto zahavta or mibaytu michutz etzapenu, that any Talmid Chacham who his inside is not consistent with his outside is not a true Talmid Chacham? We see it's worthwhile learning Torah even not for the sake of heaven, even if his inner motives are not in line with the external appearances. So how can Rava say this? How can Rava say that a Talmid Chacham whose inside is not like his outside is not really a Talmid Chacham? So we can say that we can reconcile the statement with the understanding that it is necessary to initially learn Torah even not lishma, even not for the sake of heaven, not kevaro, his inside not like his outside, in order to learn lishma. But at that stage of one's learning, a person doesn't deserve to be called a Talmid Chacham. When you're at that stage where you're just doing it even not lishma, not for the sake of heaven, you can't be referred to as a Talmid Chacham. That's why that we say every day, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam, that Torah scholars increase peace in the world. Why is that the case? When they're worthy of the title of Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, implies that they're studying Torah for the sake of heaven, without any ulterior motives, and without chasing honor or prestige. And that's when they promote peace. That's when they promote harmony, because they don't argue for the sake of their own personal honor. They're arguing for the sake of heaven. Lichvod shamayim. That's why they're doing. That's why they're marbim shalom. But you have to be at the status of Talmid Chacham, where a person is doing it lishma. If not, if you're not that Talmid Chacham and you have ulterior motives, it's still okay. You still eventually might get to lishma, but you're not Talmid Chacham, and you're not being marbim shalom ba'olam. Where does the chokhmah come from? It's amazing that we're even called. Why are Torah scholars called a Talmid Chacham, the student of the Chacham? So some of the holy books write, it's really not appropriate to call anybody a Chacham except for HaKadosh Baruch Hu alone, because God is the essence of wisdom, of chokhmah. All wisdom comes from Him. Okay, He doesn't receive; He's not influenced by others, and everybody else does receive from Him. Everybody else is influenced by God. Chokhmah is infinite, and God is infinite, and human beings are finite. Man is finite, and we require constant improvement. So Ezeu chacham halomen mikol adam. Who's considered wise? A guy who just learned. We're constantly learning from other people. So that's why we're a talmid chacham. We're a student. It's almost like we're Hashem is the rabbi. We're the student of the chacham. We can never access and attain full chokhmah. It's impossible. So this is meaning what Rava's trying to say. Any talmid chacham whose inside is not like his outside, because he's not yet learning Torah for the sake of learning, of lishma, is not a true Talmid Chacham. Because a Talmid Chacham is only someone who studies Torah lishma for the sake of God, not for the sake of his own personal honor. Because when a person starts to study, he realizes how much, like we said, he still has to learn. If a person studies lo lishma, for imaginary false honor, then it becomes easy prey for the inclination, the Yetzirah, who misleads him to make him believe that he is a prominent Torah scholar and does not need to learn from others. Why need to learn from everybody else? I already got my own knowledge. But then you're not real Talmid Chacham, because you're all in it for your honor. You're in it for your gava and your arrogance. So in that case, he certainly doesn't deserve to be called a Talmid Chacham. Interesting, staying on this note, the commandment to cover the Aron, both inside and outside, with gold. And again, like we said, Rava said from here that a Talmid Chacham has to be the same on the inside, same on the outside as he is in the inside, that they must mirror each other. The Noam Elimelech here has a great chidush. And he says, concerning the special clothing of the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol wore 4 extra garments in addition to the regular clothing of the Kohen. And he writes that these 4 special garments needed to be threaded with gold threads in them. And he explains that the 3 letters of the Hebrew word for gold is zahav. Zayin, Hey, Bet. And that word alludes to humility. You might think no, because gold is this very flamboyant metal that shines out, but zahav is actually a representative of humility. How so? He says that the word zahav decreases in value. Zayin is 7, Hey is 5, and Bet is 2. And so in order to delve into the realm of kedusha, the realm of kehuna, which is the highest level of the priesthood, and the Kohen Gadol, which is the highest level of the highest level, which is tantamount to gold, that requires shattering a person's gava, shattering his arrogance, and acquiring the trait of humility, submission, reflected from Zahav 7:5-2. Now, the obvious question is, why did the Torah allude to this as through the word Zahav? Why did they allude to the humility by the word Zahav? Why? Just because it was 7:5-2? You find another word that has a high number and goes low. There are many words in the Torah where we see this, with decreasing numerical values. So the Gemara in Baba Kama, Daf Pei Aleph, Amud Aleph, and also the Masechet Megillah, Daf Kaf Aleph, I believe, talks about that there are 3 days of the week that we recite the parasha. We read from the Torah. That's Shabbat, that is Mondays and Thursdays. So that Jews never go 3 days without hearing the Torah. It's a beautiful allusion to what we just said. The Khatam Sofer writes that the 3 days which we read under the Torah are alluded to in the letters of Zahav. Zayin is the 7th day, 7, that's Shabbat. Hey is Thursday, that's 5th day of the week, 5. And Bet is number 2, which is the 2nd day of the week, which is Monday. So based on what the Noam Elimelech said, which we explained before, we can say that maybe the Nevi'im who instituted this intentionally chose those 3 days of Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat to teach us that it's impossible to acquire Torah without the characteristic of humility, which is alluded to by the decreasing numbers of Zahav, 7, 5, and 2. And of course, famous Gemara that we've quoted many times over here in this shiur, with regards to humility, that Torah is compared to water. And why is the words of Torah compared to water? Because just like water flows from higher ground to lower ground, so too the words of Torah are only retained by someone who possesses a lowly self-image, humility. So now this goes very nicely with our pasuk over here. That the Aron, we are commanded to build the Aron and cover it from inside and outside with gold. And says Rava, Kol tamid chacham she'en tocho kebaro, eno tamid chacham. Anyone who is not on the outside like he is on the inside is not really a tamid chacham. According to Rava, tamid chacham needs to be zahav. He needs to be humble, both on the inside and the outside. He cannot behave outwardly like a humble human being, but in reality, he's filled with gava, with arrogance, with conceit, has v'shalom. So it's another way of understanding this. In fact, we see another Gemara concerning what Rava said in Masechet Moed Katan, which we're studying now in Daf Yomi. We're going to get to this in just a few days. The Gemara says, Amar Rava said, Hani tlat mile be'akamei shemi tarti ya'avuli, chada lo ya'avuli. He says, I requested, this is Rava saying, I requested 3 things from God. 2 of them were given to me, and 1 of them was not. Chuchmatei de Rav Huna, v'avtarei de Rav Chisda, okay, v'yavuli. The chokhmah of Rav Huna, the wisdom of Rav Huna, and the wealth of Rav Chisda, God, I asked him, and he gave it to me. God gave me the wealth and the chokhmah. However, advatnutei de Rabba bar Rav Huna lo yavuli. But the humility of Rabba bar Rav Huna, I asked for it, I prayed for it, and it was not given to me. So on a simple level, humility has to be earned. It's not something that you can pray for. It takes a lot of work. It's one of the hardest midot, most important midot to have, yet the hardest one to attain. But on a deeper level, Rava needed to compensate for that deficient humility. He tried getting it. He couldn't get it. He realized he was lacking it. So he expounds with regards to himself that a true Talmid Chacham must contain the midah of zahav, must contain the midah of humility, both inside and outside. Tocho kebarot. This was his teaching to all of Klal Yisrael. Okay, let us gradually move deeper as we normally do on the Thursday night class. We study the words of the Shvilei Pinchas of Pinchas Friedman. Try to understand Rava's statement in a little bit more depth. We said that Rava's statement of Tocho Kebaro applies equally to someone who hasn't reached the exalted level of learning Lishma. Meaning, even if someone hasn't attained the status of Tocho Kebaro, where his inside matches his outside, he should still learn not Lishma, okay, in order to attain the level of Lishma in the future. Now, Rashi, in this week's parasha, on the commandment to build the Aron, he writes, in quotes of Gemara Masechet Yoma, that Betzalel actually made 3 arks. In constructing the one, he made 3. 2 of them were gold, 1 of them was wood. There were 4 walls and a bottom, and they were open on top. And he put the wooden ark inside one of the gold ones, and then he put the smaller gold one inside the wooden one. Okay, and then he overlaid it with the rim with gold. This is what Rashi writes. So this way it was covered on top with gold, it was covered on the outside with gold, and inside it was gold. So you actually had a sandwich. If you were to look a bird's eye view, if you took out the top of the Aron, you had a bird's eye view, you would see the outer layer gold, the inner layer wood, and the middle layer wood, and the inner one gold. All right? That's what you had. You had 3 layers. Now, the Mefarshim find this very puzzling. If this is indeed how Betzalel fashioned the Aron, and we're not arguing with Rashi here, we accept Rashi's explanation. But then, Rava, his statement at the beginning, which we quoted, how did he conclude that any Talmid Chacham whose inside does not mirror his outside is not true Talmid Chacham? According to Rashi, the inside of the Aron was not like the outside of the Aron. The middle ark was made from wood. It was not made from gold. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the structure of the Aron, that a Talmid Chacham should be inside like his outside, then why didn't he just construct the whole thing to be gold and gold? No wood smacked in the middle. It should have just been like that. The Aron would have been inside and outside, and then it would have made sense. Rava comes along and says, you see how the Aron is gold on the inside and gold on the outside? So that's how a Talmid Chacham has to be. But that's not what the Aron is. The Aron is, in the middle, there's a wooden Aron. The middle layer is wood. So there is a amazing yesod here that he brings down in the name of Rav Moshe of Sambur. And and this yesod is learned on how he interprets the first mitzvah that Bnei Israel received as a nation, which we learn in Parashat Bo, which is the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, of Rosh Chodesh. The pasuk writes, "HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim," that this month shall be for you the beginning of the month of Nisan. And Rishon hu lachem lechodshei Hashanah. It's the first of the month. So now Rashi says, what does it mean HaChodesh hazeh? This month. What's hazeh? Rashi brings a midrash and he says, Nitkasha Moshe al molad alebana. Moshe was perplexed. He didn't really know how it worked, what to see, what kind of moon signified a new moon. It's the first time. He doesn't know. So the Rashi says, Hera lo be'etzba et alevana barakia. Hashem showed him with a finger in the sky. Ve'amar lo kazeh re'eh ve'kadesh. See it like this, the way you see it right now, that is the new moon. That's when you sanctify the new moon. So he explains a practical significance of this comment based on a Gemara in Brachot that says that Rav Alexandri, Bata de Matzle, after he would pray, he would say the following: Ribona Olami, Master of the Universe, Galui v'yadua lefanecha, sheretzonenu la'asot retzonecha. Because you know that we want to do your will. Umi me'akev, but who is holding us back? Se'or shebe'isa, the leaven in the dough. That's a euphemism for the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. V'shibud machuyot, and the government. They're holding us back. We want to do so many things, but we can't. Yehi ratzon lefanecha shetatzilenu miyadam. Please be your will that you save us from their hands. V'nashub la'asor chukei retzonecha belevav shalem. So we can continue serving you. So what does this teach me? A Jew's inner desire, what we really want is to act with Hashem's will. That's what we really want. But the problem is when we proceed to take action and make that desire into a reality, we have the Yetzer Hara, which is the yeast in the dough. The leaven is intervening with all of its might. And now it starts injecting bad thoughts. Maybe we shouldn't do the mitzvah. We start, and now all of a sudden our performance of the mitzvah is not lishma, it's not for the sake of heaven. But now, you know what? If I do it, I'll get reward. I'll do this. Now we're not doing it for the real reason that we intended to do it. And that in a way is what the Gemara says in Masechet Kiddushin Daf Mem, Machshava tova metzarfa lemaaseh. That God associates a good thought with the actual deed. Our initial thought is to do Hashem's will perfectly, the way it was meant to be as humanly possible. But when we begin to do so, we're foiled by the evil inclination, and now we're misled, and we have insincere thoughts, and we start thinking different things. So what does God do? Amazing chesed he does. Machshava tova metzarefa lemaaseh. Through his infinite mercy and kindness, God combines that initial thought, that well-intended thought that you are going to do it lishma for the sake of heaven. Okay? He's going to combine it with the performance of the mitzvah. And it's considered as if he performed the mitzvah like he originally intended to do so. Even though when you actually did it, you weren't thinking that way. You had ulterior motives. So, back to the mitzvah of the Kiddush HaChodesh. When the message that God was conveying to Moshe with the moon, HaChodesh hazeh lachem yeh Rosh Chodashim, God was saying, see it like that little sliver of the moon. God was telling Moshe, just like the determination of every month is based on that initial appearance of a tiny speck of the moon, so too, every individual needs to strive with all his might to sanctify God with that first inkling of thought that came in his mind. Yes, I'm going to do something good without any ulterior motives. And then that will ensure that the performance of the mitzvah will follow the initial impulse, okay, which was pure. So now, go back to the statement. That really a person should always strive to engage in Torah study and mitzvot, even not for the sake of heaven. Because when you don't do it for the sake of heaven, don't worry, eventually you're going to get there for the sake of heaven. What is that? What is based on what we just said is amazing chidush. If a person just intends to do a particular mitzvah not for the sake of heaven, if a person intends to do a particular mitzvah, yes, to the Shem Shamayim, that was his initial thought, that was the inkling that was in his mind. But then he sees that the inclination, the Yetzer Hara, is harassing him and injecting these evil thoughts, confusing him, that's not Lishma, persist. Keep on pushing. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Yetzer Hara is giving you, trying to make you think of the reward that comes as a result of it. Do it. God is going to associate your act that was performed, even though you did it not for the sake of heaven, but he's going to associate with your original thought, with the original intent, which was lishma. This, by the way, helps us understand one of the great questions that we have on Chumash. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, that God, in the beginning, God created the heavens of the heavens and the earth, and the name of God that's used is Elokim, which is a name of strict judgment. It's a name of din. And the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya, is a name of mercy and Rachamim. When God initially created the world, he had intent that it was going to be done only through strict judgment, but then the Chachamim write that God, it wouldn't work. The world cannot survive with that type of strict judgment, strict standard. So therefore, he inserted Midat Rachamim. So therefore, the next pasuk later on the next perek says, Beyom Asot Hashem Elokim Eretz V'Shamayim, Hashem Elokim. You see the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and you see the name of Elokim. So now you have a combination of strict judgment and mercy in the creations of the heavens. So the famous question everybody asks is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is obviously able to foresee the future. Okay, so how is it possible to suggest that he initially thought to create the world b'midat hadin and then reconsidered when he saw that the world could not survive? But based on what we said, a great answer over here. While it's true that the Yetzer Hara, the inclination, introduces thoughts of self-pride or thoughts of reward when he performs a mitzvah, nevertheless, a person has to strive to initiate that performance with the purest of intentions solely for the sake of God. Because the initial thought emanates from a place that's beyond the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara only comes in afterwards. So, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the purpose of the creation of the heavens of the earth was Bereshit, was for the purpose of Reshit. Now that word Reshit has so many meanings. Reshit is Israel, Reshit is Torah. There's so many things that Reshit is. But now we can basically say that Reshit is the person's initial impulse, what first came. Heaven and earth was there for us to serve God based on what we originally intended, to fulfill God's will at the most purest, most ideal way. So that's what it means. At first, God wanted to create the world with Midat Hadin. From the aspect of the beginning, of the way was, if man acted in the initial impulse, it made perfect sense. The world is running with din. At that moment of impulse, the Yetzer Hara is not in control. He has no effect on us. And therefore, God judges a person at that moment, bedin, the way it's supposed to be. Did he attempt with all of his power, through his will and his might? It's untainted. There's no Yetzer Hara. But when a person actually gets to performing the action, now the Yetzer Hara is there and he's harassing him and he's bothering him, God has to add the midah of chesed. He has to add the midah of rachamim. And that's why it says, on the day that asot Hashem, when there was an action involved, Hashem Elokim, God's name of mercy has to be there. Because at that point, the Yetzer Hara already intervened, which prevented a person from performing the mitzvah in the best way without any ulterior motives. So now, this also shines a light on Rava's words that we mentioned at the beginning. That the Aron has to be covered with gold inside and out. Any Talmid Chacham whose outside is not like his inside, and vice versa, they don't mirror, is not really a Talmid Chacham. We asked the question, how could Rava come to this conclusion from the structure of the Aron, since the inside and the outside were not the same? Because there was a wooden Aron smack in the middle. That was our question. So what can we suggest? That maybe the Torah is teaching us that even if a Talmid Chacham represents the Aron and resembles the ark, meaning he has within him wood, he has within him foreign thoughts, which is compared to the wooden ark in the middle, that's okay. He's still considered a Talmid Chacham. We're referring to a Talmid Chacham who strives from the depths of his heart to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lishma. And even externally, he tries to serve God for the sake of his name. But the Yetzer Hara, unfortunately, inserts himself smack in the middle. That's the wood. And he introduces improper, misguided thoughts that are not lishma, but God ignores it. He overlooks that. What does God see? He just sees gold on the outside and gold on the inside. To him, it's all gold. And therefore, the middle of the aron, which is wood, you can't see it. It's totally covered. You can't see that middle wood. It's like it vanishes through a person that studies lishma without any ulterior motives. If we were to end the shiur here, that's already a great lesson. But he takes it up a notch, one more notch. A beautiful hidush. He says regarding Rava again, any Talmid Chacham who's outside is not like his inside is not true Talmid Chacham. He takes us back to Sefer Bereshit. In the story of Avram and Lot. Lot's nephew, Avram's nephew was Lot, and Lot eventually got captured by Sodom. The pasuk writes, "Vayikhu et Lot ve'et rechusho, ben achi Avram, vayelechu vehu yoshev bistom." That the Sodomites captured Lot and his possessions, which was Avram's brother's son, and they left, and he was dwelling in Sodom. Says the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, he says that the soul, the neshama of Rava, who we've been talking about this whole shiur, who gave that whole line about your inside and your outside, the soul of Rava was concealed within Lot in Sodom. That soul was inside Lot. And he writes, the neshama of Rava, the Amorah, came from Naamah ha'amonit. Naamah the Ammonite was the mother, one of Shlomo Melech's wives, and she was the mother of Rehoboam, who succeeded Shlomo HaMelech as the next king of Yehuda. And it was only so Rava's soul came from Naamah Ammon. Now remember, Lot gave birth to two sons from his own daughters. One of them was Ammon and one of them was Moab. So Ammon, go down the lineage, and you're going to get to Naamah, and that's when Rava's soul was released from Naamah. She was a tzaddiket. In fact, he says, you learn this from the pasuk, that the first letters, the acronym of the word Rechusho ben Achi is Rava. All right? So when these negative influences took took Lot captive, they also took the neshama of Rava with Lot, and his neshama was only set free later on in history by Naamah, one of Lot's descendants. What does Rava, by the way, maybe I should have said this at the beginning, Rava is the Amorah that is mentioned the most in the entire Gemara. Rava and Abaye. You cannot go 3 pages of Talmud without finding their name. They are absolutely everywhere. So when I say Rava says something else, this is just one of hundreds of things that he says. Rava says in Masechet Chagiga, which is the next Masechet we're going to learn in Daf Yomi, he says, "My dichtiv." What's the meaning of the pasuk in Shir Hashirim? El ginat egoz yarati lirot beibei nahal. I went down to the garden of nut trees to see the green plants in the riverbed. So Rava asks, Lama nimshalu tamidei chachamim le'egoz? Why are Torah scholars compared to a nut? Now today you call a Torah scholar, you're a nut. I don't think he's going to take it too lightly. I think you call anybody a nut. I don't think you're compared to. But the Torah, Shlomo HaMelech compares a Torah scholar to a nut. Why? Lomar lecha, to tell you, ma egoz ze, just like this nut, afal pi shemeluchlach betit, that it's soiled with mud, uvitzoa, and dung, en ma shebetocho nimas. What's inside is not distasteful. What's inside the nut is good. Af Talmid Chacham, even a Talmid Chacham, afal pi shesarach en torato nimeset. Even though he may have gone astray, his Torah is not distasteful. This is what Rava says. Maybe the reason why Rava said this is because he was intimately connected to the root of his neshama that was concealed within Lot in Sodom. He himself can be described as that Torah scholar who was filthy, covered in filth and mud due to Lot's association, his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, where his neshama came from, with the populace of Sodom. Sodom was one of the most cruel cruel, I think is the best word, populations in all of history. So comes Rava, and Rava wished to atone for Lot in a similar way that we tend to do in situations when we mention evil people or people that have gone astray but have somehow come back. One of the most classic examples we see this is on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. We begin the Haggadah Shel Pesach talking about Terach. Terach was Avram's father. Initially, our forefathers were worshippers of Avodah Zarah. Why are we starting the Haggadah Shel Pesach talking about Terach? Couldn't find somebody else to talk about? You have to pick an idol worshiper? Why criticize? Like, what's going on over here? So the answer is that since Terach, yes, committed countless averot until the end of his life, but he did perform teshuvah. At the end of his life, he repented. And that's the reason why we recount his shame, because recounting that shame acts as an atonement, acts as a kapara, and therefore his punishment is lessened. So in Parashat Lech Lecha, the Torah writes, "Vegam lelot haolechet Avram hayatzonu bakar ve'olim." Lot, who went with Avram, also had flocks and cattle and tents. He was very wealthy. V'lo nasa otam haaretz lashevet yachdav. The land could not support them living together. Ki haya rechusham rav, because their possessions of Lot were abundant. V'lo yachilu lashevet yachdav. They weren't able to dwell together. Says the Chatam Sofer, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, could not bear Lot and his possessions because Lot's inner self and outer self were discordant. He was not tocho kebaro. His inside and his outside were not mirror images of each other. Lot and Abraham had to grow apart. Abraham was described as rechush gadol, meaning he had everything. There was kedusha, there was harmony. Lot is described as rechush rav. He had much, a lot. And that means that he was always seeking more. Since Lot and his possessions didn't reflect the kedusha like Abraham's did, they kept on fighting. They kept on bickering with each other until they came to Canaan. They couldn't remain in the same land. They couldn't unite. That's Lot. In fact, we see in Sefer Shmuel that there's one of the words that's used there in Perek Aleph, that Lot also has this interpretation or meaning as being covered, wrapped in a cloth. So Lot appeared to be good on the outside, and he had some good qualities because he was the nephew of Abraham, and he learned a lot from his uncle. But he was tainted. He was tainted, and that came to the forefront. That was revealed when he was amongst the Sodomites. So Vayelech Avram kasher diber elav Hashem, Vayelech ito Lot. Avram went as Hashem had told him, and Lot went with him. Lot was just a companion. He was just showing up. Look, I'm with my uncle the tzaddik. But really inside, he had problems. He had issues. All of those good deeds were superficial, based on his name Lot. They enveloped him, they covered him, they covered his true inner self. The good deeds didn't stem from the goodness of his heart. So now here comes Rava. Here comes Rava, many, many generations later, to expound what statement, what was his main claim to fame. Because I want everybody to know that if you're going to be a Torah scholar, you better make sure you're tocho kebaro. You got to make sure that your inside is like your outside. Otherwise, you are not a true Talmid Chacham. Why did he say that line? Because he was seeking atonement for his ancestor Lot, who was the root of his soul, the root of his neshama, in keeping with with that idea, like we learn with Terach. I'm going to try to fix the soul of my ancestor. Rava owed his existence to Lot. That's where he came from. Lot's son was Ammon. So therefore, he was not trying to disparage him and make fun of him and humiliate him. He was trying to portray Lot in a positive light. A Talmid Chacham needs to be good on the inside and out to make amends for Lot, who was unfortunately not good through and through. And through that process, he hinted to the fact that he was missing that tocho kevaro because his own neshama didn't participate in all of Lot's negative thoughts. So that was something that meant a lot to Rava. Rava was one of those people who was sullied in mud. He was dirty because of his ancestors, but he knew deep down inside that my inside is good. If you crack open that nut, you can eat it. It's very nutritious, and there's something good inside that nut, even though my ancestors and my covering, my lot, was sullied and muddy and full of filth. So with the Aron comes many, many lessons that we can learn. And of course, we don't have the Aron today to actually stairs. They say it's still around somewhere and buried deep in the mountains somewhere in the Middle East. But if there's one thing that we can walk out with is this idea, this notion to be true to ourselves. What we portray on the outside needs to be exactly what we feel on the inside, with regards to our Torah study, and also with regards to the relationships that we have with our friends and our family and our community members. And Bezat Hashem, one day we will be zocheh to see that the Mishkan in all of its glory, the vessels in all of its beauty, and we will see that hopefully soon with the coming of Mashiach. Amen. Wishing everybody a wonderful night. Be well.
Very good, very good. That also, okay, is in the warehouse.